And then for either one of y'all, you both touched on them a little bit, but Kittler and Branham, having those guys back, I mean, how big of a boom is that, even if it is a new system, to have that type of experience? And what did you see from them on film last year? What's kind of the biggest focus in their developments right now?
Yeah, well, I think it's hard to say. So we recruited Kittler. I mean, he took an official visit to Memphis out of high school. I recruited him before he transferred here. Had him set up on an OV, but they locked him in before we could get him over there. So we've known him for a while. I would also argue I was Kobe Branham's first offer at the University of Memphis, so I've known him and his folks for a long time. So there's already a relationship there. There was already some rapport there with those guys. But, you know, I think the beauty of having guys that have played a bunch of football, you know, the system stuff, everybody runs zone. Everybody runs a variation of gap. You know, it's just learning our terminology for those guys, or some of the younger guys, it's learning all of it. But I think, you know, their experience in the SEC, some of these environments we're going into, maybe some of the people we're going to see next season, but I think where I've been really impressed with them is how hungry they've been to improve. You know, and you look at even how they've changed their bodies since January, right? I think Kittler came back at 287 pounds, something like that, and he's up to 305. You know, and then you look at Kobe, he might have come back, he'll hate me for saying this, probably like 339, right? And we got him peeled down under 330, and he's moving a lot better. And he'll tell you the same thing. So, you know, I think that they both understand Kobe's still a young guy, and a lot of things to improve on. And Kittler kind of on the back end of his career, it's a lot of fundamental things. But I thought, you know, from watching Kittler last year, his biggest strength is how athletic he is. You know, yeah, he's very smart and those things, but it was like, man, listen, like, I'm going to need you to be able to sit down on a 330-pound bull rush down the middle, all right? Like, we're going to have to do that. And so kind of helping him round out the tail end of his game, but they've been real receptive, you know.
And Marcus, you said earlier today that you've been a part of some dual coaching offensive lines before, and it's very common. I guess just what are the biggest benefits to having multiple guys? You talked about Silverfield even chipping in, but to have two guys dedicated to the offensive line every day, what's the biggest benefit from that?
Again, to me, the biggest benefit is, you know, you're able to split guys up. Again, to me, you get more reps individually with those guys, you know, which expedites their development and their growth. To me, that's the biggest thing that I see out of it, because, you know, it's time to be interesting to see, you know, at one point in time, I remember tallying just the individual reps throughout the course of a practice. And I bet you that we're probably getting close to 200. I remember even at Ohio State, we would do that. And because we would split the guys up into 2 or 3 different groups, you're getting like 250 reps per practice versus getting 100 reps during Indy time. You know what I mean? So to me, that expedites those guys' growth. And they're not just standing around watching, because they're actually in the fire, if that makes sense. So to me, that's the biggest benefit when it comes to having multiple coaches, you know. And there's times that, you know, Jeff may be in the middle of something, or I may be in the middle of something. Hey, you take these guys, you take these guys. And even at some point in time, just because we know guys at different stages in their careers, it may be a time to split the room up. It's a different type of meeting for these veteran guys versus these true freshman guys who won't get here to this summer, if that makes sense. So I think you're able to maximize the number of coaches that you have in the room, in my opinion.
Jeff, I want to ask you about a guy that's actually not in your room, but you've coached guys blocking for Sutton Smith before, now again. What stands out to you about him?
Yeah, I think he's really come on in these last 3 practices with some explosive runs, running through arm tackles, you know, and I think a little bit of it too is him gelling with the front, with the O-line. Like, right now we're battling through some of our mid-zone stuff, and it's such a timing and like angle play. And I think Sutton's got a lot of reps with that, and as we kind of work the kinks out, getting him in the flow with the offensive line. But from a leadership standpoint, from him to be able to come in and kind of just like, I don't know, demand the room in some sense. But man, I'd also be impressed with, I'm impressed with Russ. Like, Braylon's done an incredible job in my opinion. And I know Coach kind of hit on it the other day, like the amount of effort that guy plays with has been, it's so refreshing to be honest with you. And, because I think it's contagious. And I think that it's like bringing guys along with him in some sense. But no, I've known Sut for a long time. He's done a nice job.
Jeff, I was going to ask about Terrence. Kind of, were you familiar with him coming out of high school? Kind of, how did he pop up on y'all's radar once he entered the portal? It's not often you see a guy go from D2 to SEC.
Yeah, I think it was probably just after he had put his name in the portal. His head coach reached out to Coach Silverfield and kind of put us on him and sent some film over. And, we got rolling from there. And then it heated up quick. Yeah, next thing you know, I mean, if you just refresh Twitter, it's like this guy was getting 5 offers a second. And we moved fast on it. We had him up maybe within 24 hours, him and his family, and, his representation is actually up here in Fayetteville. So it all kind of fit together there. But I think what you look at when you're evaluating guys is you're looking at their movement and you're looking at their ability to bend, change direction, and mobility. And sometimes it is harder when you look at lower level film, to project. And I think that's something I struggle with sometimes, to have the conviction and sign off on a guy, because you just don't know how does it translate with the size of the guys, the speed of the game. But what you knew is he played young. Played a lot, highly intelligent, and I think like Coach Johnson said, I think he got here and it was kind of, at first when he got in that weight room and everybody was just as big and a lot of them were bigger, so it was a learning curve for him. But he's kind of settled in and playing pretty good ball right now. He's been really, really impressive through the transition, in my opinion.
You said he's played like 3 different spots in the offensive line. Where do you see him in the future? Do you see him as a tackle? Do you see him on the interior? Kind of what do you project?
Yeah, I think we like leaving him on the edge right now as he learns the system. And because I think he's got another step of development that's going to occur in the weight room. We'll put some mass on that lower body and get some horsepower in there. Right now he's doing it all off athletic ability. Like he's playing with good feet, playing with length. In my opinion, on the interior, we're going to have to put a little more horsepower in the lower half, but that'll come with time and reps. But right now, he's having a ton of success on the edge. And so not in a hurry to move him inside. We're a little deeper inside right now anyway. But does he end up finding a home? I don't know. Where at? I think the biggest thing, and I tell these guys, we tell them all the time, like, be versatile. Like build value for yourself. If you can play multiple positions, then it's not a matter of like, I have to put the backup at this position in. We're putting the 6th guy in. We're putting the 7th guy in, and we'll shuffle the O-line so that we always have the best 5 in the game. If that makes sense.
Marcus, I want to ask you about Kavion Broussard, what he's looked like for you guys.
He's an athletic dude. He's an athletic, twitched up young man. I think football is important to him, so he's still growing. He's still a young player too. I think he started 1 game last year, if I'm not mistaken. But a ton of potential and upside with him. As most young guys are, I think there's still some development to do with him from a weight room standpoint, in my opinion, as well as technique and fundamentals. Because kind of like what he said about Terrence, some things Kavion could get away with because of his athleticism versus we know that if he's facing a day 1 first-round pick, he can get exposed for it, if that makes sense. So I think he still has a ways to go, but he's willing and he's trying to please, man. And he's an athletic, twitched-up dude, and he plays the game with the right demeanor for the most part.